Hey everyone, and welcome to Transient. Today we are going to recreate SICKO MODE. This song has actually got 3 parts, so it's one of the hardest tracks that I've actually tried to recreate. So we're gonna go over the track's 3 parts. Actually, I like to think of it as 5 parts, and I'm gonna show you why. This is the first part, it's the intro part. After that, we're gonna move over to the second part, which is this. Then there's this transition part. It's not really a part, but it still requires some work. And this is the third part of the track, which is a standard trap beat. We're not gonna have time to go over every single sound because there's just too many. If you want to do that, you can download the project and check it out for yourself, but we're gonna go over the special sounds, like this one for example. And then there's the last outro part, which is just that same beat but manipulated. Okay, so starting with the first part of the track. This pad sound is made from Contact. It's actually made from 3 different channels. This is the first one. I've used a preset called Rapman Wow. Of course, to complete it we need the amp and the EQing. If you want to take a look, this is the original Rapman. And now for the second part of the pad, I've used this organ sound. Again, I've used Contact, and the way to get this sounding right is by playing around with the different harmonics until you reach a sound that you want to achieve. This third layer is just a pitched up layer of that same organ. This is what the original preset sounds like. Then I've used a grain delay to take it up 1 octave. And some more things like autopans to give it some more movement. And then some distortion, EQing and reverb to get it sounding right in the mix. Next is the bass line. This sound was reproduced using Silent 1. If you want to check out the full preset, you can download the project. The key thing in this sound is that it's made out of a sawtooth wave together with a sine wave that gives it a bit more harmonics. Next is the beat. It starts with a pretty standard snare sequence. The decapitator and the bit crusher are used to give it some more character. Next up is a kick drum, a snare with a bit of high cut, a clap with some reverb, and 2 Sound Toys plugins to give it some more character. A very short hi-hat, and a ride with a frequency shifter. And as always, make sure to get the right notes when you're tuning the drums. And that's it for the first beat. It sounds just about right. Let's move on to the second one. This one was pretty tricky to reproduce, especially because of the 808. So Serum, which is a synth that's pretty complex, felt like the right tool to go with. I've had to compare between many wave shapes and also play around with the wavetable position to really get it sounding right. The next step was to choose the right filter. One very important thing to mention about this sound is that all of the synthesizer tweaking was done with the plugin chain of the channel turned on. I wanted to hear how the synth reacts to the distortion. LFO1 is basically behaving like an envelope controlling the filter cutoff, and all that's left is to find the right envelope shape. And last, I've made it into a WAV file. It was an easier way to get the volume envelope more accurate. I've had to do some pretty precise equalizing work. Whenever you're searching for a certain frequency to remove, it can be helpful to actually boost it first. And then you can move it around and realize if you're in the right zone. Once you've done that, you can take it back down and then play around with the width. Next is the kick drum. I've used a glue compressor to add some punch and applied some EQing. Next is this sub-bassy type of sound. The most important thing here is the sidechain compression that's being triggered by the kick drum. In these cases I like to use pre-effects mode, because that way I can still tweak the kick's volume without having it change the behavior of the compressor. Then I've used some chorus and a decapitator to give it some more character. Here you can see the sound settings. Whenever you're using a sine wave for a sub-bass, you can add a second low-pass filtered oscillator playing something like a saw or a square just to add presence to the sound. Next is this snare drum sample. I've tweaked it to the right pitch and added some distortion and EQing. Getting it to sound completely right was a bit tricky because I've had to change the tone of the body of the snare. There are probably a few plugins that are especially designed for that. What I've done here is just isolated and tuned the right frequency range. It's playing together with a layer of the original sound, and both of them are going through a room reverb. The hi-hats in this part of the track are also pretty complex. The way I've approached them is by using a few hi-hat samples. Each one of them sounds a bit different. Some I've actually extracted from different loops that I found, and then used Ableton's audio effects to get it really sounding right. One of them is just a reversed hat. Next were some extra effects. This one is basically made from a voice sample with some processing, especially distortion. And the same goes for this voice sample. Here's what it sounds like distorted. At some parts the pitch is being manipulated. And then there's a hit effect that was reproduced out of two layers. One is a ride sample that's being manipulated by a frequency shifter, and the other is a snare sample. That's it for the beat itself. There are a few more sounds playing in this part of the track, like this sample. This is the original sample they've used. And then I've used Silent One to spice it up with a second layer. Of course, I'm not sure if another synth is how they've done it. They might have used a certain reverb, but it still sounds pretty accurate. Last is this bell type of sound. I've used Silent One for that. What I really like about it is the short delay that places it in the mix. And last, this sound is playing one octave higher. Now here's the transition part. I think it sounds absolutely amazing. By the way, it's not really hard to pull off as much as it's hard to actually think of something like that. The way to do it is to export the first loop of this beat. You can export it or resample it or do it whichever way you like. So here's the wave itself, and it's being played 4 times slower than normal. Then I've tried listening to all the pitching algorithm, and texture was the one that sounded the closest. However, the original sample still had more rhythm going on, so in this case the grain size is being automated in a rhythmic way. Of course, I don't know if this is the original stretch algorithm they used in the track, so to get it sounding completely like the original, I've had to use some fragments of the original sound. And now for the third part of the track, we're going to use some standard trap making techniques. She's in love with who I am. Here's the kick drum with a bit of compression. This is the 808. I've used some distortion to get it sounding right, and a sidechain compression that's being triggered by the kick. Here's what it sounds like when they're both playing together without the sidechain, and here is when it's turned on. The 808 itself is playing a few different notes throughout the track, using drums rather than ordinary musical elements to create harmony in the track can sometimes lead to very special results. Here is the track's snare drum. Make sure to set the right length for the snare. Some EQ to take some of the mid-range off, and a compressor to add some punch. The hi-hat is made from a standard 808 closed hat. In the beginning of the loop there's a ride sample with a long attack and a delay effect. Here's the original sample, and this is what it sounds like using Ableton's vocoder to add some noise. Next are the voice samples, which have a reverb that's being cut instantly. Yeah! These type of extreme effects are very noticeable in the mix. Yeah! At some parts, the voice is being played with an autotune. Yeah! You can use any type of autotune plugin. In this case, I've used Manipulator by Polyverse and played around with the format. Last is a simple pad sound, also made out of Silent One. You can find it in the project. And it's got a second layer of a sub bass, also made out of Silent One. Last is this bell type of sound. This is what the preset looks like. It's made mostly out of a sine wave, with a lot of reverb and chorus. And then there's a second bell sound, which is also going through a lot of reverb, and an EQ that brings out everything that's playing in stereo just to make it more present in the mix. And last, my favorite sound of the track, this weird effect. The key is to get the glide right between these two notes. A pulse width with some noise, going through a bandpass filter, and using the portamento wheel, got the pitch sounding right. And last, I've added two subtle LFOs, one controlling the pitch and the other controlling the cutoff, just to add some movement to the sound. And finally, an echo effect. We're almost done. All that's left is this outro part of the track. This is actually made from the loop we've just reproduced. It's being played at halftime while using the repitch algorithm and going through some EQ and a very subtle distortion. Now let's listen to the whole reproduction. Quick reminder, the project file and the sound are available for free in the link below. If there's a song you'd like us to remake or a technique you'd like to learn, please let us know in the comment section below. For more videos like this one, subscribe to our channel. See you next time.